When two parents aren't on the same page, kids don't get lost in the gap in between them. The kids learn the game of survival there. And today, I'm giving you 3 tactical steps to close that gap and build a unified wall that your kids will bounce off of at every turn and it actually holds, even if you're co parenting from 2 different houses. Here's the truth: this isn't about you and your co parent agreeing on everything. That's not realistic. This is about your kids hitting a wall every time they're looking for a loophole, because they are looking for loopholes every single day. So let's talk about how we build that wall. The first step is killing the good cop, bad cop routine. That's a trap. And most co parents fall into it without ever noticing it. And here's how it happens: one parent becomes the disciplinarian, the one that holds the line, sets the rules, and enforces the consequences. The other parent becomes the fun one, the more relaxed, the more flexible, easier to be around parent. And nobody sat down and agreed to those roles. You just drifted into them over time. And here's what it cost you: the kids stop respecting the rules because the rules only apply at one house. And the two of you stop respecting each other because one of you is always the villain and one of you is always the hero. That dynamic is a recipe for disaster in the long run. Now, I'm going to say something that most parenting content skips over. Kids are master manipulators. You heard that right. I don't mean that as an insult, I mean it as a fact. They knew how to play both parents when you were under the same roof, and they have a lot more ammunition now that you're separated. Because the thing that used to stop them, like when you could just walk across the house and ask the other parent, "Did you just say that?" That's all gone. And the distance between two parents is a resource for a kid who knows how to use it. And they figure that out faster than you think. They say things like, "Well, mom lets me do this, and dad said it was fine last week, and you're the only one who has a problem with it." They'll run that play until it stops working. And right now, for a lot of co parents, it hasn't stopped working. They also have another move that's also worth knowing about. They wait for the right moment. They're watching for when you're tired or distracted or stressed or even on the phone. That's when the big question comes. They'll ask, "Can I go to an amusement park all day with a family that you've never met?" That question usually comes at 10 p.m. on a Thursday when you're half asleep. It's not an accident, it's strategy. So here's the tactic for step one. This week, pick one non negotiable, just one, whether it be screen time or bedtime or how they speak to you. For this one, take bedtime for an example, and it doesn't need to be a meeting, but just a simple text. Say, "Hey, the kids are confused about bedtime. Can we agree that 8:30 is the bedtime for both houses this week? It's just want to be consistent." And this is the one rule that both of you will need to enforce the same way, with the same consequence every single time, no matter whose house they're at. When the rule is the same in both houses, that's how the loophole closes. The kids stop looking for what they already know isn't there. Now, here's where it gets tactical, because knowing the trap is one thing and having a system that actually stops it in real time, that's something else. Step two is about stopping the divide and conquer play before it even starts. And this one's simple enough to implement today, and it's called the 24-hour rule. And here's how it works: any request from your kid that affects the schedule, the budget, or anything that requires a decision bigger than what's for dinner, the answer is always the same: "Let me talk to your mom and I'll let you know tomorrow." Or, "Let me check with dad and I'll get back with you." Now, here's why this works on multiple levels at the same time. First, it completely neutralizes the tired parent ambush. If your kid knows the answer to any big question is always going to be, "I'll check with the other parent," there's no perfect time to ask, and the timing strategy disappears. Second, it signals to your kid that when two parents communicate, you're on the same team. And that gap is where they've been living in, and it's actually smaller than they thought it was. And third, it gives you and your co parent the space to disagree about the answer in private, not in front of your kids and not in a text thread that they can screenshot. You hash it out between the two of you, and then you deliver one unified answer. The kid never sees the disagreement, they only see the wall. Now, I want to be realistic about this because the 24-hour rule requires something that sometimes is hard to come by in a co parenting situation. It requires you and your co parent to actually communicate, and it requires both of you to respect the rule even when it's inconvenient. Neither of those two things is easy, but here's what I know from experience: The alternative, both of you making decisions independently while your kid runs information between you, is harder for everyone, including the kids. And it'll spark one argument after another between you and your co parent. Because without it, guess what? Someone becomes the good cop and someone becomes the bad cop every time. And that's what brings me to the third step, because this one is the hardest of all three. Not because it's complicated, because it requires something that genuinely is difficult when you're frustrated, and that's restraint. Step three is this: learn to disagree in the locker room, not on the field. Here's what that means in real life. Your co parent makes a call in front of your kids that you completely disagree with. Maybe they give in to something that you've both been holding the line on. Maybe they contradict something that you said just 10 minutes ago. And every instinct you have says, call it out right now in front of everybody. But I want to warn you not to do that. And here's why that moment matters so much: because kids pay very close attention to what parent supported them and what parent pushed back. And they will use that information not once, but every time they need to. They'll say things like, you never supported me, or you always take their side, or you're the only one who has a problem with this. The moment you correct your co parent in public, even if you're completely right, you've handed your kid a wedge and they'll use it to split you even further. So here's the tactic: support the decision at every moment, even when you hate it. Why? Because a divided front is more damaging than a bad rule. And then, privately, later, when you're away from the kids, you'll have a real conversation. You can say, hey, I didn't love how we handled that earlier. Can we find middle ground next time? It's not accusatory and it's not a fight. It's two people on the same page making adjustments in the locker room so they can lead better on the field. Your authority as a co parenting team stays solid. Your kids see consistency. And that disagreement gets resolved where it belongs, between the two of you, not in front of an audience that's actively looking for reasons to divide you. Let me tell you what I saw in my own house when I was living on the wrong side of all three of these things. I was divorced and we had two houses. Kids were going back and forth. And for a stretch of time, the communication between us co parents was inconsistent at best. We had different rules in different houses, and decisions were made without talking to the other person. And my kids, who were smart and perceptive and knew exactly what they were doing, they found out the system faster than I wanted to admit. They knew which house had the rules and they knew which parent to talk to for what. They knew how to frame and make a request that made it sound like the other parent had already said yes. And for a while, it worked for them because we let it. Not because we were bad parents, but I remember when my kid told me mom said yes, and I found out later that he didn't even ask her. I felt like a fool, but I realized it was because we hadn't built the wall yet. And once we started communicating more consistently, once the 24-hour rule became the default, once we stopped correcting each other in front of the kids, and the manipulation attempts didn't disappear overnight, but they stopped working when the kids tried them. And once something stops working, your kids stop trying it. And that's the whole point. We were successful at building walls that they couldn't climb over. You're not trying to raise perfect kids. You're trying to build a system that makes the manipulative plays pointless. Look, co parenting is hard, and I'm not going to pretend that it's not. You're trying to run a coordinated team with somebody you may not be on great terms with, about people you both love deeply, while your kids are actively looking for every crack in the wall. It's a lot to manage. But here's what I know: consistency wins every single time. One non negotiable that both of you hold, the 24-hour rule on anything big, and the locker room for every disagreement, those three things don't require you to be the best friends with your co parent. They just require you to be on the same team for the kids, even when it's hard, and especially when it's hard. So, if you want to go deeper onto why kids go to one parent instead of the other and what you can do about it, I've actually made a video on exactly that. I'll put the link in the description. It's worth watching if you're interested. So, drop a comment below. Which one of these three things do you think is the hardest to pull off? Because I have a feeling that most of you already know which one it is. Because life isn't hacked, it's built. And I'll see you in the next one.